states. Among those voicing concern about Russia's attempts to influence the presidential election, a bipartisan group of senators who call for a congressional investigation into the cyber attacks that they say should alarm every American. Jack Reed, the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, is one of those senators, and he says he has no reason to doubt the CIA's conclusions.
They definitely intervened in the election. They collected information against both Democrats and Republicans, and they seem to only have released information with respect to the Democratic candidate. The motivation, that's something that we're going to continue to probe, but it seems that they were interested in disrupting the Democratic campaign as much as they could.
You don't have any question about that conclusion because the FBI, as you know, it's reported that they're holding back on ascribing a motive here.
Well, there's a difference between a motive and what happened on the ground, if you will. What seems to be clear is that they had been able to enter into the computer systems of both the Republicans and the Democrats, and that they, through proxies, disseminated information against the Democratic candidate, did not in any significant way do so with the Republicans. You could question motivations, but it seems clear that they had a goal and objective to provide information that would be detrimental to the Democratic candidate.
And what other explanation could there be other than wanting to help Donald Trump?
The only other plausible explanation would be just to sow general confusion, but at some point they clearly seem to suggest a preference in terms of who they were going to attack or provide detrimental information about, and that was the Democratic candidate.
What does this represent to you, Senator Reed, as somebody who's looked at intelligence for as long as you have?
Well, it demonstrates the practice that the Russians have of surreptitiously using cyber and other techniques to involve themselves in elections, to distort elections. It happened overseas, and now, unfortunately, it's happened dramatically in the United States. And so we have to be aware of this. That's why Senator McCain and I are working to set up a subcommittee to look at this issue, but longer term, to look at the cyber capabilities of Russia in many different dimensions. But the first issue is trying to get all the facts that we can out about their participation in this election cycle, because we have to be able to assure the American public that in 2 years or at any time in the future, our elections are not determined by surreptitious activity of foreign intelligence services. They're determined by the voters.
Well, I'm sure, as you know, the president-elect, Donald Trump, is saying he doesn't believe that the Russians did this. He says he's not at all sure they did the hacking. He said it could have been a man sitting on a bed somewhere. What do you say to his reaction to all this?
Well, it seems quite obvious that this was done by the Russians. Our intelligence services have indicated it. They've done so very carefully. To disregard the obvious is not a good trait in a leader in any situation.
To disregard the obvious?
Yes.
Well, do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, it seems that the facts are overwhelming that there is the involvement of the Russians in the election. The involvement not only in terms of penetrating Democratic operatives and organizations, but also, as the intelligence community concluded, also the Republican National Committee. So they were involved, and that seems to be not an issue of contention. And to simply deny that is to deny what, to me, appears increasingly to be obvious, a fact.
Senator, what would be different between the investigation that you and some Republican senators are calling for and the investigation that President Obama has called for inside the administration to be done by the inauguration?
Well, the president is able to use the intelligence agencies and other agencies to vet the information, to protect sources and methods, to come up with all that could be released to the public. Our investigation, I hope, will build off of that. I hope the document the president provides us is available so we have a common base of facts and knowledge, and from there we can ask other questions that I think are relevant going forward. What can we do to prevent this in the future? I think also it raises again the issue that's been so contentious and over the last several months about the president-elect being much more open and candid in his financial dealings, so that there's absolutely no question of any type of bias towards any institution or individual or country.
Well, two other questions. One is, what should the U.S. do if this is proven that the Russians did this hacking, and if they did it for the reason that it appears that they did?
Well, first, I think forewarned is forearmed. Well, the American people will be aware of the tactics, the techniques, and the motivations, if we can determine them conclusively, of the Russians. That'll be useful. Then second, there is the ability to take action against them. Right now, we have sanctions in place because of their assault on the Crimea, because of their destabilizing activities in the Crimea. If this raises that level, we could certainly consider something like that. I think also in terms of international criticism. This is something they have done in the past in other countries. If this is their method of operation, we have to be able to, I think, enlist the aid and the support of other countries, our European allies and across the globe. That would be something that would send a strong message that this will not be tolerated by the United States nor by other countries.
Final question, Senator Reed, and that is, what's your reaction to the president-elect saying in an interview yesterday that he isn't taking all the intelligence briefings that he's been offered because, quote, I'm like a smart person. I don't have to be told the same thing in the same words every single day for the next 8 years?
I think that is not a sensible way to approach the issues that the president has to deal with. Things change almost instantaneously. Situations arise. Context is important. It's also critically important that you are so involved in the intelligence cycle as the president that you're able to judge adequately when someone presents a viewpoint to you. A periodic sort of a quick study, if you will, is not going to work. It takes that constant exposure, and I think it's not a good leadership, particularly for a president, to simply say, I know it all, I'll just take a little a refresher course once in a while.
Senator Jack Reed, the ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thanks, Judy.
And we'll debate Russia's actions with a former director of the CIA and former ambassador to Russia in the Obama administration after the news summary.